Cara, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on. Excited to talk about camp today.
Thank you. Excited to be here, Joshua.
Well, let's get into Church Camp, your new book, which is great that you dive deep into really, I would say, white evangelicalism and church camp and how those coincide and what was the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of it.
hmm
What then is your relationship with camp, and why is camp something that actually can help you unfold white evangelicalism and what it is?
hmm Yeah. Well, I was big in camp. So I started going to camp my first summer. I was 9 years old. It was 1988. I'll let listeners do the math on that. And then probably 8 years later, I started volunteering at camp. 2 years later, so 1998, I worked my first full summer at camp, what the camp world might call a seasonal staff employee. And then after that, that was when I was in college. After college, I became a high school English teacher. And so I had my summers free. And instead of then working at camp all summer, I was a camp speaker. So the camps that I worked in which were both denominationally and non-denominationally affiliated. They were pro women. They were okay with women standing on the stage, preaching or talking. So that was really where my camp experience took me. So camp to me was something that happened, if you count those camper years, really for the better part of 25 years of my life, leading up to about a decade ago, was when I finally left. And now I can't even remember your second question. Was it how the book started?
No, I would say so. As somebody that's been involved in church camp for a
hmm
long time
Yeah.
and maybe, left like 10 years ago, but why is camp something that you said, hey, we want to look at camp, but really look under the hood of white evangelicalism? And why is camp a really good feature and focus for us to look
Yes.
at?
Well, thank you for reminding me. So I am a writer. I write different things, but one of the things I do is I write books. And so my first book came out in 2019, and then we had this thing that happened around the world called the pandemic.
Really? I missed
Yeah,
that.
not sure if you knew. There was this thing called the global pandemic, COVID-19. So COVID happens, the pandemic happens, and my writing stalled, not only
Hmm.
because life was really hard, but I think also because there was a bigger message for me, and it was a message of the both and.
Hmm.
So from that, I had another book that I put together. It was a collection of essays that paired different words, different opposite words together, and looked at how both could be true at the same time. So, got the through the pandemic, I created this book of essays. My agent takes it to sell to publishers, and publishers say, thanks, but no thanks. We need a through line. We don't want
Hmm.
individual essays. We want you to go deep with one story.
Yeah.
So I say that because as I thought back on life and on my own experience, that's where, when I looked at and thought about camp, I thought, wow, camp is one of the most formative places for me. I
Yeah.
am who I am today because of camp. So many of my best friends are from this exact place. And as I've gotten older, I don't like the word deconstruction in general, but as
Hmm.
I've gotten older, I think there has been a spiritual evolution of sorts, a change that has happened. And that's when, as I looked back on camp, I also saw that there were some unhelpful parts, some harmful parts that I deemed helpful for a long, long time. But as life went on, I began to see those through a different lens. So, really, the book birthed from paradox and
Yeah.
from holding the tension.
So I want to go into the tension, and before we dive into some particulars of camp and what that was like, then how do you, as you were writing these essays and you were thinking about both and in spiritual life and, hey, our daily lives, our political lives, our just every part of our life, it seems to me, and I've heard a statistic that there is a small percentage of the population that could actually hold a both hands. They
Mm,
really just think through either or, type
Mhm.
of things. It's all black and white.
Mm.
Gray is very difficult for a lot of people. W- How do we walk into tension when we know that there is bad and there is good, and we could hold both at the same time and actually take what is good in the middle of it, and then actually say, hey, this may have harmed you and I'm sorry, and like really wrestle with those things? What does like walking into the tension look like?
Mm. No one has asked me that question before, Joshua. This is good. I think walking into the tension means holding an openness. Holding or having an openness. It means embracing when we have been right and when we have been wrong. And again, I think this is, to me, this is part of the gray, which is part of the mystery, but which is also part of God. I now call the Episcopal tradition home. And I say that because my very last class in seminary, this was 15 years ago, but it was a class on Anglican theology. And I became a convert after that. I mean, I just was like, but the reality is that I fell in love with the theology, and there's a deep theology within the Episcopal or
Hmm.
Anglican tradition that embraces the mystery, which to me is embracing the both and so, even though there were so many people, I interviewed a wide variety, almost 50 people for this book. There were folks who absolutely wanted to just throw camp under the bus. They were like, burn it all up. And then there were folks who were like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with camp. Kids meet Jesus here. This is one of the most incredible parts. And I think there are folks, there are those of us in the middle who say, yes, we can hold both. And for me, I acknowledge the good and I acknowledge the bad that I
Mm,
participated in, that I perpetuated. So I think there's a willingness to be able to hold or see both.
yeah.
I'm not sure how to answer that, but I think that's where I'd start.
That's a good starting place. And so let's dive into some of that, the good and the bad, the tension of
Hmm.
camp. My camp experience, I would say we were on the periphery of Christian camp. I went to a basketball camp every summer,
Hmm.
and it was a Christian camp, but we really didn't talk much about Jesus until the final
Yeah.
night. And we talked a little bit about Jesus, right? Of course, it's the final night. You got to talk about Jesus.
Hmm.
But it was really values based, but it was really transformative for me. And I then
Hmm.
continued as a counselor, coach, a
Yeah.
teacher in those camps for many years. And man, I've had like some of my most formative experiences were in camp. But I didn't have like this particular church camp experience that you were talking about in the book. So
Hmm.
take me into what you have seen as I would say, a typical white evangelical church camp. And where did it come from? What's the history of it? And what was like the formation of these camps? And what was the ultimate goal?
Yeah. Well, I write quite a bit about this, especially in the very first chapter, as you may well know. But if we can put it plainly, the point of camp is conversion. The point of camp is to convert, and it is to convert, yes, to a particular way of thinking as far as a viewpoint of who Jesus is and of who God is through an evangelical lens, but it also is to convert to norms found within white evangelicalism. That's where it can be hard to define because white evangelicals are not just defined by what they believe, but they're often
Yeah.
defined also by their voting habits, by their cultural preferences, by a whole litany of things.
Yeah.
So
Hence now we have
this,
we have studies that say Muslims are identifying as evangelicals and because of their
mm,
political stances.
mhm.
So it's just interesting that way. So it's true. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at the 81%. Like, the reality is that it's not just about voting a particular person into power, it's also about the values that are embodied within
Yeah.
this belief system. So, for me, the book is deeply theological, even if we're unpacking a whole lot of things along the way. But the book is laid out by the 7 main talks that I gave as a camp speaker over the years. And that was at a number of different types of camps, from young life camps to, again, denominational and non-denominational camps. And I think in all of those places, it goes back to really, it goes back, you're looking at conversion, but it also goes back to a particular message that is going to get a person or persons from point A to point B. And so if
Yeah.
the point is conversion, then how do we get there along the way? We can then say, well, we get there by presenting the four spiritual laws. Bill Wright, Campus Crusade for Christ, 1956. He comes up with the four spiritual laws, which results in literally billions of people around the world converting to a particular brand or type of Christianity. And that's where, I always used to laugh at it, but that's where you have the two cliffs. If listeners could see me now, I'm putting up my two fingers, and you have man on one cliff. It was never a woman. And you have God on the other cliff. And God loves you so much and wants to be connected to you, but God cannot be connected to you, or he cannot be connected to you. It was always also a male God, because sin separates you. And that's when Jesus comes in on the cross. And so in the camp context, there was oftentimes a message that was presented over the week that was a truncated version of the four spiritual laws, that
Hmm.
oftentimes erred heavily on the side of penal substitutionary atonement theory, which was one particular way of viewing God, but it was also a particular way of viewing self that I argue was actually really harmful. And through that, there are so many other parts of camp, from a speaker's position, and really from and through and with a lot of different camps. This is it, if conversion is the end goal, then this is how you get converts, is by preaching this message.
Hmm. So I think that's helpful. So all the fun and all the games and everything, and it leads into nightly talks, leading people into this conversion experience. And if you look back with a lot of talks that lead to conversion experiences, one-time conversion experiences a lot of times don't lead to long-lasting authentic faith. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it is like, hey, I had this mountaintop moment, and then they're thinking, man, I don't know how this reaches my everyday life, so it's not really there for me. So I want to take back. So I think discipleship, mystery, all those things need to happen so that we actually see God with us in our life
Mm-hmm.
and what that looks like. So if part of that is like this mountaintop experience, is there a different way that you think that camp may be structured that could be helpful to people to wrestle with things throughout their entire life and not just have a mountaintop experience? And but mountaintop experiences can be good too. So this how do you wrestle with it in the middle of it, knowing that, hey, we only have a week with these kids, but then like follow up and stuff too. Like all of that stuff is in the mind of people looking like, what's next? How do we do this? Is there a
Yeah.
way to shift?
Yeah. I am a huge outdoor person. Outdoors person. I'm not sure if we put an S on that. But part of why I am an outdoors person is because that is where God meets me. And I know, whether I step into the backyard, into my garden, and am just out there, or whether I go on a hike, or whether I take my kids camping, or whatever it is, I know that if I am out in the outdoors, then I'm going to come into a space in which the sacred and the holy is there, and I'm going to be confronted by God. And so I think part of the tension that has happened with a lot of our camps, which is not true of every camp, but in a lot of our camps, I think, because it's what we think kids need, kids or campers or whomever is there, camps can so easily become programmatic spaces that are trying to entertain, that are trying to just be big and campy, for lack of a
Mm,
better word or phrase. They're trying to be, the most explosive and the funniest, and that also then goes down into how God is presented, just in being or trying to be the biggest of
mm,
all. it's almost as if we forget that God is already in that space, and that
Mhm.
there need not be this convincing that needs to happen. So I think for me, in answer to your question, I think I do want to say I think there are so many camps that are doing it right. I think camp is a gift in and of itself. So many places don't allow cell phones, so, and our kids are
Yeah.
all getting cell phones younger and younger. So it's one of those that cell phones are banned for the week. But if there can simply be an invitation to bask in the beauty that is in front
Mm,
of you, I think that's one of the things. But that's one of the things that camp allows. It
mm,
allows time and space to just be, and to then not have to fill the gap with convincing, with trying to convince another, of what they need.
mm. I think that that's good and
It's
that's
a start.
helpful. It's
All
a
right.
start, and
Okay.
I agree with it. I think it's a start. I mean, I'm just saying,
Keep
how do we
pressing.
do that? Like with kids. So how do you shift a whole mindset saying that it's my job to entertain and it's
Mm,
my job to be honest, like, hey, if I'm if I was the MC at night there, my job was to be the clown. Like it was
mhm,
that was part of it, right? So my job is to entertain, to do skits, to do things to
mhm,
make sure that these kids can like be engaged and
mhm.
entertain. So, what is then the tension between engaging and entertaining, and in a space of like holding space to encounter the divine in a real sense, in a real thing, and it's not just a show, but it's the real thing. What's the balance when you do have those tensions?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, and perhaps you and I can meet collaboratively afterwards to come up with a list of what can be done. But I think our culture, and I love that your podcast is called Shifting Culture. I think there is a belief in within our culture, and whether that's just for parents and teachers and caregivers, or for the entire culture, but for our this generation of our children, that they have to be constantly entertained.
Hmm.
And there's a different word for that, but so for instance, one of my children, he's 10, one of my boys, just broke his leg 2 weeks ago while we were camping over spring break. Not exactly the
Congratulations!
best thing. Yeah, thank you. It was our family's first break. It was a very
Nice.
big deal. He has a
Yeah.
big red cast now. I got to sign mom with a heart around it. I
Mm,
felt very glad, very happy that he let me do that. But for Theo, my son, there's not a whole lot he can do right now besides just lay on the couch. It's really easy for me as a parent to simply let him be on a screen the entire time, because what else? I feel kind of bad. What else is he
yeah.
supposed to do? He can't throw the football. He can't play baseball on his team. He can't do anything. But I can let him not be on a screen the whole time, and I can let him figure out what he can do when he is not being constantly entertained. And so it can almost hurt. It almost hurts him
Yeah.
for me to take away the iPad, and then he's like, "Oh, wait a minute. I can play my trumpet and make up new songs," which are horrible, by the way, but I support it because
Uh,
he's just blowing air into this gold
I'm
piece
glad
of
you support
metal.
it. My parents wouldn't let me practice the trumpet. I got kicked out of fourth grade band because I did not practice, and now I don't know how to play an instrument. So good
Joshua,
job. Way to
I'm
support it.
gonna send you ours at the end of the school year, and you can learn, because I don't want to hear it anymore.
Thank you.
But I mean, just as there are, just as there is this undergirding belief that we need to entertain our children being all of our children,
Mm,
what would it look like in a camp setting to do the same?
yeah,
To just let kids figure that out, and to figure out just to completely go into the metaphor, but to figure out the trumpet that's lying right there beside them, and to just, like, again, I take my boys camping and I see what happens when we get into the woods. I mean, granted, broken legs happen, but also they don't get screens when they're there. And
yeah,
pretty soon they're making new best friends 2 campsites over, or they're riding their bike until, 9 o'clock,
yeah.
until it gets dark. They're burning their marshmallows as black as they can. I mean, they're figuring out fun because they're being given an opportunity to simply enter in and embrace.
Mm.
So
I think that's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I think, yeah, we need to create spaces where, yeah, kids are bored so
Yeah,
that they
yes,
can
let kids
engage.
be bored
Exactly.
because then good things are gonna happen from it, so.
Yes, that's good. So when you were looking back and you were saying, okay, maybe all of this good stuff that I thought was really good. Hey, maybe there was some stuff that was malforming me. It wasn't forming me in a way that actually was helpful. What were the threads? What were the things that you started to pick at that really started it? Like this, I go, oh, maybe that was the malforming thing.
Yeah. There were a number of malformations, if that's a word.
Yeah.
I think for me, it started with people. I began to look around and see who was not there. Within Christianity, there's we oftentimes use the phrase of who's sitting at the table or who is welcome at the table. And so for me, I began to see the exclusion that was taking place, in particular toward women, toward people of color, and toward the queer community.
Yeah.
I began to see that in the threads of people that I loved. The two people that this book is dedicated to were both people that were their names are Michael and Sarah, and they are two dear, dear people to me. One of whom is a person of color, the other of whom is white. They both came out later in life, and the reality is that for both of them, the camps that they worked at kicked them out because they were not straight. And so that was where a lot of this started. For me, there was also a deep theological starting place that I really just began to wrestle with both the message I had always believed, but also the message I was communicating about who God was and about who we as humans were.
Mm,
And it's, I do not think that we need to be made to feel like horrible human beings. One of my chapters that's on this is titled Dirty, Rotten Little Sinners. And I just don't believe that that is who God sees us as. So, if we're talking about human depravity, I think there are other ways that we can look at God and about how God looks at us that doesn't make people feel like
mm.
pieces of poo. So, so I think I'm not sure how much your listeners want me to cuss on air, but yeah. So I think
Poo is
those
a
are probably
great
two of
cuss
the
word.
starting points. Okay,
Poo is a
then poo
great
is the
cuss
word
word.
we're going to use. Yes.
Makes me laugh. So now, if we're in these spaces, white evangelicalism, we've made God a little bit into our own image. We made Jesus into our own image instead of being made in the image of God. We're transposing it. What were aspects that you've seen that go, oh, that actually doesn't actually look like Jesus, God? That looks more like white Westerners.
Mm. Well, I think I heard this most with the people of color that I interviewed. And as I note in the book, the easiest people to find to interview were white straight males. The second easiest were white straight females, and then queer identifying people, and finally people of color. And to me, that also shows the harm that happened. So in that way, I think a lot of the conformity happened. A lot of the conformity that white evangelicalism invites folks into is a conformity that looks and believes a certain way. It's a conformity of assimilation. There was one young Black man that I interviewed, and I found him and invited him to do an interview after reading something that he had written online.
Mm,
But of the cultural and theological assimilations that he was invited into, this is what he writes. I'm just going to read a short paragraph. I lament the idea I needed to buy Chacos, use multicolor highlighters for my Bible, and listen to white Christian music to feel like I was a part of what God was doing. Excuse me. As a Black kid, I felt forced to sacrifice the parts of my Blackness I loved and the parts I didn't even know existed to have a seat at a table which was built on white normativity. I do not like Comfort Colors t-shirts, but that's what I wore because Young Life told me that's what I should like. My Blackness was once used as the punchline of a skit because my area director said there would be nothing funnier than a large, angry Black man coming in and tackling someone. So I think that within this, yeah, I think that the conformity and the assimilation is real. And yeah, and I think it's something we need to lament.
Yeah. We do need to lament those things, that aspect. I I mean, I see it all over the place where, we've transported. I remember I think it was a few years ago, I was teaching in Brazil, and I was teaching on something found in Ephesians, and I remember afterwards this pastor came up to me and says, how come I've never heard this? Like, this is the
Hmm.
first time we've heard these things." And I actually had to apologize. I was like, I apologize for my white evangelical brothers that have transported something that wasn't actually in scripture, but it
Hmm.
was just culturally part of what they knew. This is the thing that I think we have to do some work to be more self-aware in our own
Hmm.
awareness, because oftentimes I think that camp counselors and people at camp, pastors, people, they don't know what they don't know. And I think most of them are really trying their best, and they're just regurgitating information that they have heard. What do you think that work looks like for people to say, maybe I don't have everything figured out. Maybe everything's not as certain as I thought it was. What can I start to do to help me, like, lift the blinders off?
Hmm. That's a big question. And that also might be one that you and I need to meet after this podcast episode to come up with a huge list. I don't know if there is a way in which this can be forced. I think so much of
Yeah.
this is time. I think for me, my experience of, for me, for instance, my experience of marrying my husband, who identifies
Hmm.
as Black, who is the son of a civil rights icon, that was really big invitation into wrestling with and identifying my whiteness and privilege. And so for me, 15, 16 years ago when we met, I need to figure out when we met and married and do the math at some point. But for me, that was really the start of my
Mm.
own journey into issues of racial justice, but also, again, owning my own privilege and my whiteness. In the same way, when it comes to, and that would be, I should add, a journey that I am still on, that I will always
Hmm.
be on, because mine is a learned experience and not a lived experience. In the same way, when it comes to our spirituality, when it comes to our belief systems, to Christianity, I don't know if there necessarily needs to be, if there has to be a catalyst for that. Maybe the catalyst is just like an inkling inside, and
Yeah.
maybe then it's a matter of, okay, I'm going to start reading books that challenge me. I remember when I was in seminary, we had all of our main books, and the reality is that those main books were all, for the most part, were written by white men. And then we sometimes had alternative titles, and those would be the titles that were written by people of color or by women. So maybe
Yeah.
it's a matter of looking at our bookshelves and I'm saying, okay, who do I need to be learning from that is here, that literally they're not on my bookshelf. So we start reading and listening and learning to others.
Mm.
I think for me, there was a big unpacking that happened theologically. And this was one of those, I don't like the word deconstruction, but I think it was my own deconstruction process,
Yeah.
or at least how culture might define a deconstruction process,
Mm.
in which things just weren't sitting right with me anymore. And so for me, I process through writing. That's how I process.
Yeah.
Sometimes I process verbally, but I process through writing. So I began to write through these things and to question, and just to go to let it be a question too,
Mm.
because I think the world I was in for so long, you didn't question things because
Yeah.
it was so black and white. You either believed, and when you believed, you were in, or you didn't believe, and when you didn't believe, you were out. So what did it mean to still be a part of that, but to also let myself question and wrestle with that didn't
Mhm.
sit right within me.
Yeah. I think one of the things there, I mean, a lot of people have been talking through bounded sets and centered sets. A
Mm.
centered set where
Mhm.
Jesus is the center. And no matter where you are, if you're facing towards Jesus, that's fantastic. You could be really close to
Mhm.
Jesus and people think that you're in the group, but you could actually
Mhm.
be like facing away from him and you're not even going towards him at all. You're going the other direction.
Mhm.
But it looks like camp there is like, hey, here's the bounded set. Here's the line on, on cry night, we're gonna get you in to this this bounded set. Now you could
Mhm.
be a part of the family of God.
Mm.
And now you're in. So is there what do you think how has that been perpetrated and thought about in camp if you look back on what it is of here's a line and the people some people are in, some people are out, and we treat people differently whether they're in or out.
Yeah. Yeah, I define this, at least in the book, whether or not it makes sense to other people, but I define it as a caveat of belonging, where oftentimes there's a message of Jesus. The message of Jesus is proclaimed and is taught from the front, and the reality is that Jesus is the most beautiful part of the Christian faith. Like, Jesus is why we call ourselves Christians,
Yeah.
because Jesus died and rose again, and we have life after death, like N.T. Wright would say. But I think within a camp setting, there is oftentimes a bounded set of Christianity that is presented, but it's presented through the lens of Christ and of who Jesus was. So, what does it mean instead to invite, like you're saying, to invite people into a belief system about who Jesus is that is unbounded? One of the things I also that I write, I say, when Christ is the well, everyone is in and no one is out. Artificial boundaries, sometimes disguised as caveats of belonging, are thrown out the window, or for purposes of camp speak, off the second platform on the high ropes course, the one right before that unwielding set of unstable bridges. This time, when a camp speaker introduces campers to a man who is the biggest gift of all, to the tender pioneer whose generous, wild inclusion paved a way for the rest of us to be equally generous and wild in the love we show other people, they actually mean it. So
Mhm.
we're introducing kids or campers or humans at large to Jesus, but we're not saying, and now you have to believe this certain thing. You have to be this certain thing. You have to act this certain thing. You have to wear this certain thing.
Mhm.
We are just simply saying you are in because you are human. And
Mhm.
as a human, you are loved and you are embraced by Jesus. And that's what
Mhm.
matters.
That's beautiful, and I think that means it's then, "Hey, I'm in this beautiful well,
Yeah.
and now it's a process of life, like, I get to,
Mm-hmm.
like, go on this journey, and, our Christian life is really a pilgrimage, to God, and so
Yeah.
instead of I think what we have done, especially at camp, is if the goal is conversion, the
Mm-hmm.
goal is, like, one decision, you're in, you're done. Right? You get your get out of hell free card and
Mm-hmm.
you're set. Then just do whatever you want the rest of your life. You're good. But we got you.
Yeah. Or
So
you're good until next summer when
or
you do
you're
it again
next
and you
summer
recommit
you
your
do it
life to
again.
Jesus for the
Exactly.
37th time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which happens over and over again at camp,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That happens. And so excuse me. What then is a camp for pilgrims? What's a camp that looks a little different? What you're calling people to right there in what you just read. What is a camp like that? And are there I know I don't know. I really like to get into practicals and particulars.
I
It's
can tell.
I know it's fun for me. Because I want to know, like, what does it look like to have a whole week of like
Mm,
pilgrimage instead of a week of like you have to jump through this hoop, then this hoop, then this hoop.
mhm. Yeah. Well, Mr. Practical, um, that also it is a great question. There are several places in the book that I highlight camps that are proclaiming a different message, that are valuing a different thing. I think again about my own family. I identify as white. My husband identifies as black. Our two boys identify as mixed race some days, and some days they identify as black. I don't know if they will ever identify as white, not only because of the color of their skin, but also as and because of how society identifies them. But for them, when I think about the conversations we have around the dinner table, it is a conversation that is wild and crazy. I'm always a little scared when someone comes in because you never know what's going to come out of their mouth, out of their mouths. But it is a conversation that is encompassed, that can be encompassed by their spiritual identities, by their racial identities, by who they are intellectually and
Mm,
emotionally, by and physically, by all the different parts and facets of who they are and what makes them them. And so how then, in leading to an answer to your question, how do we encompass and honor
mm,
and celebrate all the many parts of who we are? Part of why I have a hard time thinking about sending my own kids to the camps that I spent so many years at is
yeah.
because I don't know if they are going to be honored
Mm,
for who they are and celebrated for who they are. If they are going to walk away feeling like the only way that they can be loved, and this is an answer of both spiritual and racial
yeah.
complications, if they are only going to feel loved if they believe if they believe a certain message and look a certain way, then that is I have done a disservice to them. The camp has
Mm,
done a disservice to them.
yeah.
So practically speaking, I think there are a ton of camps that are doing it right, that are honoring kids and campers in those ways. This is not a Christian camp, but there's a camp I found along the way. It's a Jewish camp for kids of color,
Mm,
and it takes place every summer in Marin County, which is north of San Francisco, here in the Bay Area. But they bring in Jewish kids, some of whom are spiritual and or religious, some of whom are not, because Judaism can
yeah.
oftentimes be encompassed by both. But they bring in these kids and they celebrate both their religious and cultural identities as young Jewish children, and they celebrate their identities as children of color, and they
Mm,
merge the two of them together. So this camp has, which Jewish camping is a whole nother conversation,
yeah.
because it is a thing for
Hmm.
our Jewish brothers and sisters, but they are doing something different, and the
Mm,
kids who are going there are having life-changing experiences. So
mm,
I think that's part of how we start, is by honoring the wholeness of who a
mm.
person is.
I think that's such a great starting point. Like we could see people for who they are and not think of a program. And I
Mm,
I think that's just in every aspect of our lives. It's so easy to think program and
mhm,
programmatically in everything that we do. And it's so much more difficult to see people
mhm,
for who they
mhm,
are and try
mhm,
to meet people where they're at. It's just
mhm,
more difficult. Like
mhm,
practically speaking, it's harder to do that.
mhm. Yeah.
So I commend people for doing that, and it's a good hard work
Mm,
that they're doing. You know, as you started to interview all these 50 people, did you see any common themes as you were interviewing people of things that came out of
mm.
their answers?
Yeah, I would say the two questions that probably got the biggest response. There was a question, and I openly write about this in the book, but I say true or false, and I recognize also I say this is probably a leading question, but true or false? Camp was made for white, straight, rich kids. There was an outstanding number of people who absolutely agreed with that. And the reality is that I think that is seen not only in the cost of camp and who is then showing up, it's seen in the racial disparities that take place, both within staff but also of campers. And white, straight, and it's seen certainly in who is there and who is not there. And
Yeah.
so camps, because of their standing as nonprofit organizations, are allowed to discriminate also against kids with different sexual or gender identities. I think the other piece, though, one of the questions I asked, I said, what was the theology communicated or that you perceived at camp?
Hmm.
And this was where, and I tried to interview a whole bunch of folks, both people who were still in the camping world who said, my God, this is the best thing that has ever happened to the world, all the way to those who were like, burn the place down, and threw in a couple of expletives along the way. But when it came to the theology, this was also one of those that there was an overwhelming response. Here are just a few of them. Jesus saved you from an angry God. You were saved from going to hell. Another one, you're dirty, but don't worry. God loves you so much that he killed his only son. A third one, Jesus loves me, but his dad thinks I'm a piece of poo. There's another word written in the book, but I'm not sure if your listeners are listening to this while driving in the car with small humans. And another one, I'm a wretched sinner and I don't exist, and I cannot exist without God.
Hmm.
And I think about those statements, and there's more that are listed
No.
in the book, but I think about those and about what that communicates about who God is, but
Hmm.
also what that communicates about who humans are.
Hmm.
And to me, it's no wonder that wide swaths of those who previously identified as Christians are deconstructing by the day,
Hmm. Yeah.
and are not finding God within themselves or within their belief systems. They're not there. There's fit no longer exists
Hmm.
between the two.
If you've talked, I don't know why I have this in my throat. If you if you start
Allergy
to,
season.
maybe it's allergy season. You're right. If you talk to these some of these people that are then deconstructing, if you don't like to use the word, although the word has been used a lot in this conversation,
We can use the word, it's fine.
but if we talk through, like, then what actually holds people, like if you have talked to people or talk to people and go, man, this church camp experience wasn't great, I want to burn it all down, or my faith, there wasn't much to it, I don't find God in here. Is there anything that is holding people in the midst
Mm,
of a place where they do feel unmoored and they feel like, hey, I don't know what's up anymore, I don't know what's right and wrong, I don't know what's up and down, I just like, what is it? Is there anything holding people, and is there like a common theme that you've seen in the midst of people wrestling with these things
mm,
that they're being held with?
yeah. That's a good question. To which I say to all of your questions, you're a very good question asker, Joshua.
Oh,
I would
thank you.
just like to point that out. I think I have a hard time answering this because I think it is different for everyone.
Yeah, it is
I
different.
think
Yeah.
the pandemic I think the pandemic did a number
Hmm.
on our churches and on our belief systems.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just something that I'm seeing on the West Coast, but I don't think that we are the same people, not just the pandemic, but also the racial reckoning that's happening in our country. Also, just all these different movements that have been
Yeah.
happening over the last 20 years. Theologian Phyllis Tickle, she has a book. I think it's a 2008, so it's almost 20 years old now. But her book, The Great Emergence, which is about the fact that every 400 years, starting with Christ, every 400 years there is this reckoning. There is this laundry basket being turned upside down and
Yeah.
over with that which was the face of Christianity that is then dumped out and made anew. And she writes or wrote that we are in that season right now, which she calls the Great Emergence, in which everything is being flipped, turned upside down. So, is there something that is holding these people? I think for those who continue to find solace in or with God, and or with the church, I think there is sometimes solace in other faiths or forms of spirituality that are more open to their belief systems. So,
Hmm.
for instance, I think a lot of folks are finding home in a lot of folks who maybe were in that previously are finding a home in post evangelical environments, or in Protestant environments. I know for me, I found a home in the Episcopal Church, which is wildly different in some aspects from what I grew up with and from this world that I was encompassed within. And also, it's the same. I think for a lot of people, though, they're as people deconvert and are leaving Christianity by the thousands every single day, they don't necessarily step into new environments, and so I don't know what's holding them. But I do think they are forever searching and
Yeah.
looking, and so what does it mean to notice that and to hopefully create spaces where people can still be found?
Mm, that's so good. That's so good. Okay, Kara, I want to end in the camp conversation with
Boom.
some camp experience that was really life giving for you. It could be as a camper or as a counselor. What was really life giving?
Yeah. Again, Joshua and his questions. The image that comes to my mind, so for 2 summers, the 2 summers after my freshman and sophomore year of college, I went and worked at this camp and I was a ropes course instructor. And we would there was a team probably of 5 or 6 of us, and we would go from all these different elements. There was the ropes course itself, but you could also be the low elements instructor and the climbing wall instructor and the zip line instructor. So you would just rotate every single week to these different places. And when we were on the high ropes course, we would don our oh my gosh, I just forgot what it's called. What do you wear when you're rope climbing? When you're ropes climbing? Our
Ropes,
our harness.
carabiners,
It's a
your
harness.
harness.
Yes. We would have all the above. We would have our harness along with a big long rope and our carabiners that were attaching us. And we always had to have someone up in the trees who would just be dangling from the trees to help campers
Mm,
when they came through, because there would always be that scary person, or there would always be that person who was really scared.
yeah.
So for me, I think there's that image of kind of being held and of dangling, but also of helping others,
Mm,
and of the confidence that came from that. I wasn't necessarily super scared to go up there. I thought it was pretty fun to just hang and dangle from the
yeah.
ropes at the top. But there had to be an element of trust,
Mm,
and so I think for me, just the confidence also that camp instilled, but the desire to help, and then being acknowledged and being celebrated for exactly who I was in
yeah.
that moment, but also just overall. I think that was something that camp gave me that I'm just
Mm,
so grateful for.
mm. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful image. I love the picture of that and what that means and that says about community and who we are in
Mm,
with one another,
mm,
and especially in this world of America when it's hyper individualism and it's all
mm-hmm.
about me.
Yeah.
I think that that's a beautiful picture that you just presented. Kara, I have a couple of questions
Yes,
at the
sir.
end. Actually, I'll do a few questions. Number
I'm
one,
ready.
what hope do you have for church camp? That for your readers, people would pick it up and read. What do you hope that they would get from this?
I hope that they laugh. I hope that they feel deeply. I hope that they wrestle with the mystery. And I hope that they walk away longing for something better and realizing that something better is possible.
Nice, nice. If you could go back to your 21-year-old self, what
Oh
advice would you
boy.
give?
Mm. Ask more questions. Yeah,
Good advice. Very good advice.
there you
That's
go.
really good.
I feel like these are rapid fire, so I don't need to add anything,
No, that's
but I'll let us
fantastic.
sit with that. Yeah, sit with the implications of that.
All right. Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
Mm. Well, my husband and I are very, very behind, but we have been reading, or we've been watching, excuse me, Bridgerton. We
Nice.
took like a year pause, but we've been picking it up just even this last week, and we're like, oh, this is so good. Um,
Nice.
I just read this book. It's very big and fat. It's titled "Here I Am" by
Mm,
Jonathan Safran Foer. He's the
yeah.
one that wrote "Incredibly Loud" and something like that. What is that book called? Do you know which one I'm
Close.
talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, "Extremely Loud and
I mean,
Incredibly Close."
yeah.
Thank you. This one, I feel like this one, all of the like funky theology nerds who who are drawn to, for those of us within Christian spaces who are drawn to the Old Testament and the Jewish tradition, are going to find resonance with this book, which honestly follows part of the story of Abraham. So,
Hmm.
but it's completely fictional, set in New York City, modern day. So yeah, I just read that. I
Nice.
don't know if I would say that I loved it, but I did finish it. I was intrigued. So
Congratulations on finishing Here I Am.
thank you.
That's a feat. It's always nice when you finish a
Oh my
novel.
gosh. It was a lot of pages. I
Yeah, it
normally
looked
stop at like
big.
200. I was like, this is a commitment from the free little library. Whew, it was a big one.
That's good. How can people go out and get church camp? And where would you like to point people to? How could they connect with you?
Yes. Church Camp is available or will be available on April 29th, wherever books are sold. I would encourage you to go into your local bookstore and order it, just because I always love supporting local independent places, but you can also find it online wherever you like to buy books. You can connect with me. I'm on Substack, Cara Meredith, .substack.com. Otherwise, I'm on most of the internet spaces, and in those places, I am Cara Meredith Writes in most of those places.
Perfect. Well, Cara,
Bye.
thank you for this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. I really enjoyed getting into camp experience, what it was like, the good, bad, and the ugly of it, and how maybe we could reimagine something different. Thank you for actually accepting some of these like heavy, deep,
Mm.
hard, practical questions that I threw at you because I think they're good. It's something that we should wrestle with. I really think that as we're thinking about how we entertain,
Mhm.
how we try to make God in our own image, how
Mm.
we have made people who are in or people who are out, we want to make sure that people look like us.
Mm.
All of those issues I think are really good to deal with, that we have to start to uncover what is behind those and really get
Mhm.
to the what I think what Richard Rohr says, the really real underneath
Mm.
everything.
Mhm.
And when we do that, I think, hey, this world can be beautiful and camp can be beautiful. And so thank you for wrestling with those things with me. And thank you for this conversation. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Joshua.